Hey guys, this is Illusion Podfics. We're going to be reading Spider-Man Reborn by Korean. This is Chapter 13. Damian still avoided Peter, but he wasn't too mad at him anymore. Peter had made it a game now to sneak into whatever room Damian chose to take over and hide until he was spotted. Damian avoids trying to hurt him now ever since their dad talked to him, leaving Peter with a very wide margin of troublemaking to get away with. At first, Damian caught him easily, but Cass kept teaching him, and eventually Damian took at least 5 minutes before spotting him. His dad hadn't tried to dissuade Cass from teaching Peter because he wasn't fighting, so Peter continued his lessons on stealth with Cass and gymnastics with Dick. Tim even spent time coding with him when he visited. Peter pushed himself further into the corner above the bookshelf. He could just barely spot Damian by the window with the sketchbook. Ever since the museum, Damian would lock himself in the library or hide in the garden to avoid everyone, and Peter finally managed to slip inside before being caught. His brother had a talent for art, and Peter liked to watch the process. It reminded him of MJ sometimes, and seeing his brother draw was peaceful in their generally hectic household. He had hoped to have a better spot to see what Damian was drawing, but he couldn't move without being noticed just yet. Peter pouted, pushing the non-existent dust bunnies away for a better view. If he could make it to the bookshelf just behind Damian, he could see what he's up to. But he would have to get down first. Damian, have you seen Peter? Dick poked his head into the library, catching Damian's attention immediately. He would have noticed if Peter tried to run across the room. If he had his spider abilities from before, he could have crawled along the ceiling. Now he would have to risk it. I have not. Okay, let him know I'm looking for him if you do. Peter managed to climb back down, hidden by another bookshelf and Alfred's plants. After moving a book around a little, he left it balanced just enough to fall from the highest shelf at his signal. Peter crept around, farther from Damian's window. After ensuring Damian wasn't paying attention, Peter shoved the bookshelf. The book easily fell over the edge with a loud thump. Peter ran as Damian looked in the opposite direction, reaching the shelves closer to Damian's spot. Now the climb. Peter hopped up to reach the higher shelf, pulling his way up carefully. He'll have a good view of Damian's book from here. What are you doing? Peter yelped, letting go of the shelf at his brother's voice. He pushed himself away to avoid hitting the other shelves below as he fell. Arms caught him with a quiet grunt. Sk! Why did you let go of the shelf? Damian scoffed, dropping him the rest of the way to the floor. 'Cause you scared me! How do you know I was here? Peter pushed off the ground, turning to see Damian leaving the library. Wait for me! Peter ran after him, rushing to get out of the library before the door swung shut. Damian was halfway down the hall by the time he got out of the room. Damian! Leave me alone. Why? I want nothing to do with you. Yeah, but why? You are infuriatingly childish and immature. You are useless to father, and frankly, I do not understand why he chose to keep you, Damian snapped before stomping off. But I thought we were okay. Peter frowned, watching his brother leave. He never had a family like this before. Brothers and sisters, 2 parents, and a butler who is more of a grandpa than an employee. Families spend his time with each other. He loves every minute he spent with his Aunt May. Why is it so hard now? He thought they were better now. Useless. Maybe he is. Peter isn't as trained as before. He can't fight, and he cries when he's hurt. He can't really do anything but watch his family go out every night. He can't protect them from the rogues and the criminals aiming to hurt them. But he will get better. He just needs to grow up. Peter was still not allowed to learn to fight. Teak had hovered over Peter for days while he had a limp from Damian's kick, and he finally went back to Bloodhaven last week. Peter preferred his family to stay in the manor, but he's given up with Dick. At least his oldest brother visited a lot, and called him too. Still, Peter didn't want to be useless. Mom, can you teach me? Peter raised the master lock he took from Steph's room to show his mom. Maybe if he learned other skills, he could do something else to help them. Damian couldn't call him useless if he learns how to do more things. Of course, kitten. Come here. His mom excitedly patted the couch, pulling hairpins from her head. She snapped them in half before handing the pieces to Peter. You'll have to be gentle when picking a lock. The rungs inside are delicate. Slide 1 pin along the bottom and use the other to tweak the blocks inside. Peter followed her instructions, wiggling the second piece until he heard a click. He beamed up at his mom as she smiled down at him. Good job, kitten. Now keep going. There's never only one piece to a puzzle. Peter made it past 3 more clicks before accidentally resetting the entire lock. He pouted when she told him to try again. Peter eyed Cass, who watched them from the other couch. When had she joined them? You got this. Peter smiles at the signs. He can do it. Peter Wayne Kyle can handle this. Trying again, Peter made it 4 rungs before resetting it. His mom ran her fingers through his hair as he focused again. He'll get it. It can't be that hard if he already did 4 by his 2nd try. Someday he can use this skill. He will be useful. Damian was sat in the garden today, sunlight barely passing through the thick clouds lit in the field differently than usual. Peter watched his brother from the door while considering how to approach him. Maybe he was still mad about the shirt? Peter had hoped that the museum trip would have helped them get closer, but maybe that was wishful thinking. Master Peter, perhaps you would care to join Master Damian on the grass rather than hiding here, Alfred suggested, a tray of snacks in hand. Peter peered at it, standing on his toes to see what Alfred made. A new platter for Master Damian. There was no meat that Alfred generally adds with the cheese and crackers. Peter spotted apple slices and oranges organized in some floral display. Can I take that? A peace offering for Damian. Peter could try to use that as an excuse to talk to Damian. Maybe apologize, too. Alfred hummed, lowering the platter for Peter to take. The platter was definitely set artistically. The slices were all arranged in neat little lines and little flower shapes. Peter took the tray carefully before leaving Alfred's side. Damian sat farther out into the field as he started to make his way over. His brother was a lot sharper, noticing when anyone approached him except for Cass, so Peter wasn't surprised when he locked eyes with him. I brought you snacks! Peter placed the platter on the blanket set out for him before dropping down himself beside Damian. Peter waited a moment, watching his brother focus on his sketchbook again without a word. I'm sorry. What for? Damian sighed before closing his book. I don't know. What did I do? Damian eyed him, arms closed over his chest. I'm not angry with you, so do not apologize. Peter found that hard to believe. He called him useless. Damian had to be angry with him about something. He just wasn't sure if it was the shirt or something else. You said I'm useless. Yes. You cannot do anything at the moment, though I have been informed that that was by design. I do not harbor ill will for something our father has lacked to instill with you, Damian explained, if only to confuse Peter more. Their dad was keeping Peter back? He knows his dad refuses to let him learn how to fight, but he wasn't doing it with any ill intention, right? Perhaps Richard was right. You are a child, immature and untrained. Someday you shall learn what is needed of you. Someday. Peter was starting to hate those words. He knew that there was little he could do at this point. He knew that he had to wait till he was older to actually do anything, but he couldn't not do anything either. He's been trying to help his family, keep them safe while at home. Did they not realize that? I want to help everyone, though, Peter tried, his voice sounding smaller than what he meant to. Damian watched him for a moment, studying him. Then I suppose you may assist me. Go sit under that tree. Peter glanced to the tree his brother pointed to. He wasn't sure what he was helping with, but it was a start. A truce. Damian was offering a hand to his little brother, and Peter would be crazy to turn that down. No! Don't go! Peter yelled, stomping his foot. His dad frowned at him from the couch, clearly not moved by Peter's tantrum. His dad was leaving Gotham for a few weeks, and Peter did not want him to leave. His dad would be taking a jet out and heading off for some fight or something even more dangerous. Peter couldn't sit back and let him go, not when the curse could just as easily strike him like his parents from before. I'll be back in 2 weeks, chum. Peter tried dodging his dad's hand, but he was still pulled into the hug. He wiggled, refusing to accept it. How can Peter keep an eye on his family if they kept leaving? No! His dad's arms tightened around him, familiar fingers threading through his hair. Peter couldn't do anything about this. He doesn't even know what his dad will be doing, and that bothers Peter just as much as him leaving. What if he doesn't come back? You'll die! Don't go, Daddy! Peter sobbed into his dad's shoulder, little arms wrapping around his neck. If he never lets go, his dad can't leave. His parents from before left around this age, and they never came back. He was left alone so early before. He didn't want that to happen again. What if Parker Luck takes his parents now? The curse already took Jason, and it tried to take Steph and Tem too. He couldn't risk it again. Oh, chum. The hand cradling his head held him closer, his dad's voice softening. I'll come back. I promise. Peter's mom eventually disentangles Peter from his dad, despite Peter wishing so hard to stick to him. He cried, reaching for his dad as he left for the Batcave. Damian and Dick watched from the side quietly. Peter ran away the moment he could. He couldn't escape like before, so he hid in the attic, crawling under a few storage boxes. Peter pulled Zitka close to him. Damian was right. He was useless. If he was bigger and older, he could have gone with. Before, Peter could have followed him to the fight and protected him. Now he can only wait. Why do you come up here? Damian stepped around an old box, peering down at him with a frown. To be alone, Peter spits. He doesn't want his dad gone. He doesn't want to be left alone again. It's unfair, and Peter hates it. He hates him for leaving. Why couldn't his dad stay? Why did he have to go? Tsk. Damian joins him on the floor, glaring at the wall ahead of them. Peter eyes him warily, unsure why his brother joined him. He was sure Damian didn't really care about him, so this was not what he would expect. He thought he and Damian were better now, but even still, he acts distant with Peter enough times to remind him of the distance between brothers. Cass was the only one to ever join him up here. What if he doesn't come home? Peter finally asks, looking up to Damian. What if? Do not worry about the possibilities when the outcome is unsure. Father is Batman. He cannot be stopped, and would surely return. I do not understand your obsession over the eventualities. Peter could only hum. He has a reason to worry. He's lost so many people before, and still they kept falling away from him. How can he protect them? What can little Peter Wayne do? The weeks dragged on without his dad there. Dick spent more time at the manor to watch over him and Damian, so his mom could still work full-time. Cass and Steph would try to take him out for burgers, and Tim would even try to teach him different ways to hack. Still, Peter couldn't stop worrying. Batman had to go somewhere too far, too dangerous that he couldn't call every night. Peter didn't sleep anymore, unless his mom or siblings were there too. He tried staying up late for them after patrol, and Alfred always took him back to his room. He hated it. Peter really was useless. Let's go to the park, Pete. Bet you can't climb a tree faster than me, Dick tried, crouching near the crates. It wasn't a secret that Peter hid in the attic anymore. After the first day, Peter ran here more and more. It was creepy but quiet, and no one could hear him cry, except for the times they tried to drag him out. I want Daddy. I know, bud. He'll come home soon. There's still a few more days before he should be back. Dick tapped his shoe before Peter could pull away further. He'd want to hear about what you were up to while he was gone. Don't you want to have some stories to tell him? Peter considered the option. Maybe if he had to fight another tree, his dad would see that he couldn't leave Peter behind. He won't go anymore if he thinks Peter would get hurt without him there. Maybe he'll be jealous he wasn't there to watch Peter climb the tree, and he'd never leave again. Two split minds warred over the reasonings. One dark and twisted from experience, while the other still held on to hopes and childish beliefs. Before Peter knows that vigilantes and heroes will always go to danger. He used to swing right in the middle of it, after all, but now Peter can only hope he grows fast enough to protect his family who insist on doing the exact same thing he once did. He won't grow up hiding in the attic all day. Okay. Sometimes Cass had days that reminded Peter of Black Widow and the Winter Soldier. Days where she sat in her room like a statue, staring at a wall. Those days were rare and far in between, but when they happened, Peter worried. He sat on the floor by her feet as she stared at nothing with Zitka in hand. Natasha would go to the gym for hours, dancing to ballet when those days came around. Sometimes Mr. Barnes would join her. Peter had learned some ballet once before. He couldn't remember the moves anymore, but he wondered if it might help his sister. Cass? Peter tried, watching her eyes. Do you want to dance with me? She didn't move. Peter stood carefully, reaching for her hand. She flinched like when they first met, her eyes meeting his. Trying for a smile, Peter repeated his question as some awareness came back. Cass stood as Peter led her out of the room to the gymnasium. Inside, Peter found the tablet that was left inside for him to use when he looked up new moves. He quickly connected the audio to the speakers before pulling up a video. A tutorial might be too slowed down. Finding her performance, Peter widened the screen before leaving it up on the bench. We gotta follow her, okay? When Cass nodded, Peter started the video. The dying swan began to play as Peter tried going onto his toes. Cass joined him, following a step behind as she watched the screen. They moved their arms as they slowly turned around the mats. Cass stayed on her toes the entire time as Peter struggled to follow. Moving further back, Peter grinned as his sister matched her pace with the ballerina. Her eyes stayed glued up to the screen, only completing half-turns in order to watch her movements. As they neared the end of the song, Cass had tears in the corner of her eyes. Peter floated to the ground as they died, barely rising in time for the final piece before the screen faded to black. Thank you, Cass sighed, wiping a stray tear. You're welcome, Peter smiled, tugging her hand down for a hug. A faint memory of Miss Natasha's words rose through the fog. Dancing is control of yourself. The Red Room tries to take that control and twist it, but now, when I dance, it's for me. Cass dances for herself, too. Peter didn't know all the details of where she came from, but he knew they tried to have control over her, have her follow orders no matter her opinion on them. She wasn't with them anymore, though. She dances for herself now, too. Peter restarted the video, joining her side as the instruments began to play again. He was late. It was 16 days after his dad left, and he wasn't back yet. "Mommy, call Daddy. He's supposed to be back." Peter tugged on his mom's hand, pulling her away from whatever book she was reading. "Your father has a terrible habit of being late. I wouldn't worry too much, kitten." She didn't understand. He can't be late. Being late means something happened, and something happening means something bad. Peter whined, pulling at her hand again. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't tell her that his dad could be dead if he wasn't back yet. "Miss Kyle, Mr. Kent is here." Alfred knocked on the door to the library, his eyes glancing down at Peter. Peter shrunk closer to his mom. There was something wrong. He knows it. Peter squeaked when he was suddenly airborne, tucked into his mom's side as she thanked Alfred. Together, they made their way to the sitting room that Alfred brings their guests to. Peter would prefer the ballroom room over that one. The sitting room was pristine as always, couches cleaned without any toys or gaming consoles in sight. Everyone used the room for guests, usually guests his dad didn't really like, so why were they going there now? "Selena?" Clark Kent stood up when they entered, his brows furrowed at Peter. "Can we talk in private?" "Is Daddy dead?" Peter pulled away from his mom, leaning out towards Mr. Kent. There were so few reasons for him to come to the manor without his dad there, and only one logical one. No, he... Clark Kent rubbed the back of his neck as he looked for words. Peter watched him because he already knew. "It's just going to be late, Peter. He'll be back, just... late." "Selena? Why don't you go play with Cass, kitten? I'll come find you." His mom put Peter down, lightly directing him towards the door where Alfred stood. They won't just say it with him here, but really, he already knows. He doesn't need anything sugar-coated because the facts are there. Peter rounded out of the room. The overly familiar path to the attic went uninterrupted. His dad was missing. The Justice League didn't want to say he's dead, but it didn't matter. Parker Luck leaves no survivors. Peter hated that he couldn't help search for him. He hated that he was trapped at home while the Justice League worked to bring him home. Would they even find him? What if they don't? Peter couldn't just wait for answers, though. He had to improve so he could help his family. Tuck your chin in, raise your arms, protect your face. Damian was still rude sometimes, but he finally agreed to train Peter again, even if it is in secret. Peter is learning more things. He's too small to do much, but soon he can join them. Until then, he will prepare here and learn as much as he can. Damian has been patrolling with Dick under the Batman cowl, and he even moved in with Dick after a month of their dad going MIA. That hasn't stopped them from seeing each other at the manor often enough, despite the changes. Peter ducked as the punches flew overhead, following his momentum to throw a jab at Damian's ribs. His brother stepped back before circling around Peter. He tried to dodge, but he still caught the heel of Damian's foot, flying back into the mat. "Ugh," Peter groaned, pulling himself back up. Damian watched him a few feet away, arms crossed. "You're too slow. 5 laps." At least he was learning. Peter took off, running along the wall of the room. He just has to keep this up, learn everything he can before someone comes in and ruins it. Peter wasn't sure where his dad got their suits from, but Peter had done it before with a hoodie and trainers. His families were vigilantes without powers, so Peter could do it too. He just had to learn first. Learn to fight without holding back. Learn to dodge without a sixth sense to warn him. Learn to listen without hearing the entire city. If his family can do it, then so can he. Peter dropped into the mat after the laps, panting. He ran all the way to Crime Alley before. This shouldn't be so tiring already. "Get up," Damian ordered, taking a stance Peter has quickly become familiar with. He groaned, rolling to his hands and knees before pushing himself up. "Block my attacks. Anticipate." Peter yelped, jumping back at the first swing. He dropped to a roll as a high kick nearly knocked him out. Peter pulled back, dodging what he could and blocking what he couldn't. Before, Peter had all the help of the radioactive spider bat at his side. Now, he was just plain old Peter. He ducked under a swing, stepping around to his brother's back. Damian was quick to turn, his leg raised already, aimed for Peter's side. He fell back, using a handspring trick Dick taught him to put distance between them. Acceptable. Damian stopped his attack before making his way to the bench that held their water. Peter quickly followed him, bouncing on his feet. "Can I come on patrol now?" He won't improve by just practicing in secret here. He had to be out there, protecting the little guy and chasing off danger from his family. He needed to watch over them at the very least. "I'll be backup." "Tsk, you're only a beginner. The criminals will kill you before you have a chance otherwise." Sometimes, Damian sounded like he cares about Peter. Sometimes he sounds like he must be the one to kill him. Nonetheless, Peter beamed at the unintentional worry Damian showed. "You love me! I will stab you." "Peter!" Tim yelled, shooting up from his desk. Peter ducked behind a bookshelf before he could be spotted. Steph took his hand before leading him towards the cabinet on the far left side. "I know you drugged me again, you little imp." "Shh," Steph hushed, placing her hand over his mouth as Peter giggled. Tim had been working on some secret project for the past month while helping with Wayne Enterprises, and it was no longer a secret that Peter was the one putting sleeping medication in his foods and drinks. With the added responsibilities Tim had, he started to sleep a lot less. Alfred had made some changes to wean Tim off coffee, but his brother continued to avoid sleep. If drugging him got his brother to sleep, well, it's basic science. Peter crawled into the secret passageway with Steph falling behind. His dad's paranoia worked out in Peter's favor. The passages led from most rooms and can get him far away from the crime scene before Tim can find him. Hopefully, he'll get out in the same room as Alfred so that Tim couldn't catch him. "He woke up so fast," Peter giggled, turning down a corner that slanted beneath the floorboards of the manor. "I think he's built up a tolerance." Steph nudged his legs to indicate the next direction as she laughed. Peter turned right, crawling quickly. "We'll put the whole bottle then," Peter cheered, ignoring the rational voice that talked about overdose and numbers. The 18-year-old Peter had conformed to Peter Wayne's age. He knows things, many things, but sometimes the voice was so quiet he couldn't be bothered to listen. "You might actually kill him," Steph laughed before pulling his foot to drag him back to her. "We're here." Steph pressed on a panel, raising the floor up as she climbed out. Her hands quickly returned to help him out. Alfred stood by the stove, an eyebrow raised at the pair. Peter grinned, ducking behind Steph as they heard Tim's shouting echo down the hall. "I believe I heard rats in the pantry. Master Peter, Miss Stephanie, would you mind checking for me?" Alfred turned back to the pot, his hands returning to his work as he offered them sanctuary. Peter rushed forward with Steph at his heels. They dived into the cupboard before closing the door in time for an exhausted Tim to stomp in. Peter's hands clasped over his mouth, stifling his laughter as Tim interrogated Alfred. "Tim?" Peter peered into the bedroom, spotting his brother illuminated by the laptop balanced on his knees. After a bad patrol ended with Tim injured, he'd been put on bed rest. As expected from his brother, Tim wasn't resting. "No caffeine in here, Pete," Tim groaned, rubbing his cheeks tiredly. "Why are you up?" Climbing into the bed beside him, Peter looked over the files on the screen. Whatever this project was has been taking up his brother's time to a point that he was seriously concerned now. "Was it a new rogue? Is there a new danger coming to Gotham?" "You said he's alive, right?" Tim sighed, pushing the laptop away to focus on Peter. "You said it for every one of us, but you've given up with Bruce, and, honestly, I think he's alive. Don't tell the others, but I'm positive I can find him." Alive? His dad could be alive? Peter hadn't allowed himself to hope this time. Parker luck had struck and taken his dad as suddenly as it had before. He couldn't be so lucky. It's impossible. His siblings were safer. The curse always let them come home, but his dad? Alive? He hoped the relief and wishful thinking wasn't as evident on his face. He couldn't hope for something so hard to believe. He couldn't expect this universe to be so kind. "Yeah, I'm looking for him, and I'm pretty sure that I can bring him home, or at least direct the Justice League to bring him home." Peter wasn't sure what to think. He wasn't sure if believing his brother was right, but he wanted to. He wanted to believe because he's been right before. He knew Steph would be back. He knew Tim was fine. He knows Jason will come back soon. He knows and believes. Because what else can he do? What else is there for him to do but to believe? Tears blurred his vision as he let himself hope. He flung himself into his brother's arms, quietly apologizing at the flinch as Tim's ribs were jostled in the hug. His dad was alive. Maybe believing it can make it real, because he's been right. Alright guys, and that is the end of Chapter 13 of Spider-Man Reborn by Karirin. I hope you guys liked this chapter, and I'll see you in the next one.